live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of PredRev Live. We're so excited to have you all here watching this live stream. We have another very interesting topic to cover with you guys. And of course, we've got some wonderful experts from the Predictable Revenue team to really dive into that detail again. Yeah, welcome. We're going to do a little round of introductions to let you guys know who everybody is here and who's going to be basically sharing their knowledge. Why don't you go ahead, Brandon?
I'm Brandon. I'm one of the account strategists here at Predictable Revenue. So I help on the delivery team, helping our clients achieve success with outbound methodologies and actually executing and running those campaigns for them. And my specialty is LinkedIn outbound. A couple years ago, we were sort of looking at different strategies, and I helped contribute to the development of utilizing LinkedIn quite a bit as an outbound channel. So happy to be here. Look forward to chatting today.
Awesome, Brandon. And our next contributor here is Bernard.
Hey guys, so thank you for us, Bernard. I work really closely with Brandon. I'm SDR at Predictable Revenue. I'm a team lead as well. And like I said, I work front lines, work really closely with Brandon, and yeah, I'm super excited to share what's going to happen today. It's really exciting, actually. So
yeah, awesome. Me too. So as you guys can kind of see here, we've got somebody that's kind of on the methodology side of things, really coming up with that strategy. And then we've got a practitioner as well, somebody that's actually executing on that strategy and booking meetings with the strategies. So that's why today we're talking about prospecting smarter using LinkedIn. With over 40 million decision makers using LinkedIn, this platform has become one of the best places to prospect. But are you approaching these potential customers correctly? This week on PredRev Live, we are going to show you how to prospect smarter by finding the right people and starting conversations that turn into closed deals. We're going to cover how to prospect smarter, not harder. We're going to talk about how to identify the right companies and prospects. We're going to talk about things to do before approaching a prospect, and we're going to talk about how to write a great message. And with that, I will hand it over to these two very capable gentlemen who are going to walk us through exactly how to do all that.
Absolutely. The first thing that I want to kind of touch on a little bit is what should be done before reaching out to a prospect. Social selling, LinkedIn as a channel is this interesting beast. With it comes this sort of social debt, and it's a really great opportunity to build trust utilizing this channel. A lot of people can see a ton of information about you right off the bat when they go to your profile, if you have it set up correctly. I'm going to share my screen here because I've got a couple things that might be nice to visualize. So for anybody who runs LinkedIn Premium or LinkedIn Sales Navigator, they might be familiar with something called your social selling index. You can actually click into it in LinkedIn Premium to see how you sort of stack up to other people in your industry, other people who share the same title as you. And that gives you a really good base point to see how you're utilizing LinkedIn. The four sort of pillars of that are your professional brand, the people that you're targeting, reaching out to the right prospects, and we'll touch on that in a moment. I'll go over how to sort of build out a sales navigator search and some of the key parameters that you would put in there to sort of whittle down and get the people who are off target out of the list and filter them out, get through to the people who are on target that you do want to be reaching out to. The engagement that you do within LinkedIn. So not only the content that you're sharing yourself, but the content that you're engaging with, people relevant to your industry, and then building trust through the content that's actually on your profile, how you're telling a story about how you're helping your customers out, and the content that you embed directly into your profile. Those sorts of things all go a really long way into building that social proof and building that trust before you even really met somebody. Cruising down to this next slide here, I'm just going to go
Brandon, I
over.
just want to, I can say something to that. The last two especially is important for working on the SDR side. So the engagement, be engaging. So constantly put yourself out there, constantly post topics, be socially accessible, and post relevant information on there. Be personal. Don't hide behind the profile picture. Be the person that you want to be. I think that creates a lot more of an even playing field, and even it's more engaging that way also.
Absolutely. And LinkedIn's really interesting in the way that they score you and the algorithms that that help you actually become visible. Engaging, only sharing your content, for instance, and engaging with your company's content can actually penalize you in terms of visibility. So, endorsing other people's profiles that are, similar titles or relevant to your industry, commenting on other people's posts, liking other people's posts that are outside of your organization, that's going to crank your score up and actually helps with visibility across the board. So, contributing to the platform by sharing relevant content, valuable content is a great way to build trust, but engaging with other people is going to go a long way as well. In terms of optimizing your profile itself, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit there, and a couple really quick adjustments that could be made that that will have a big impact. So, consistency across your brand is a big one. Your marketing team works really hard on creating a lot of great content. Your banner image, I'm sure that there's something within your company that you can utilize to get there, instead of LinkedIn's just sort of blue geometry picture that is there by default. The headline, this, I would say, the way I describe this can kind of set the tone for the rest of the profile. A lot of people can tend to create their LinkedIn profile as if it's a CV or a resume, selling themselves as opposed to selling the company that they're working for. As opposed to writing, your position in your company, maybe just a quick one-liner about how you help, certain personas achieve a specific job to be done. Helping innovation directors, build their innovation funnel, just as an example. And then the summary within your profile and the actual job description can follow that as well, just elaborating more. If you tell a story about your customer, how you help them, that goes much further in building social proof, as opposed to saying, constantly hit my quota, achieve my sales goals.
It's like creating a thread for conversation too. It's like even if you change the banner, like Brandon said, people comment on the banner, that creates a hook. You can talk about the banner, you can talk about what's going on. And then the headline, definitely, you're not there to self-promote. You use the banner to start a conversation. People see that that's like a kickoff point, because obviously the title on your job title and all that's going to show up later in your experience, and all that stuff go lower down on your profile. The most important thing is the conversation starter in the headline, I would say.
Absolutely. And when I say, make your profile about the customer journey, how you help people, and building that relevance there and starting to build that trust. Of course, you still want to include your accolades, your achievements, your achievements at your current and past roles, but maybe just don't put that up front and center. That can be pushed down a little bit, because if you're utilizing this channel for prospecting and reaching out to people, and they click through to your profile and want to see what you're actually about to determine whether or not a conversation with you might be relevant or worth their time. If you're talking about people like them in situations like them and how your organization helps them, that's going to resonate with them a lot more, as opposed to your previous work history. And then going back to the marketing team working so hard to create amazing content, you can embed some of that content directly into your profile. So if you have a case study, if your target accounts are one particular industry and you've got a case study for that industry, embed that in your profile because it's going to resonate with everybody you're reaching out to. Or if you've got some sort of value add article that your marketing team has created that deals with some of the jobs that your target market typically has to achieve on a daily basis that might make their lives easier, embed that too. Again, stuff to build that credibility and trust with these people.
I have a question here, Brandon. How did you learn about all of this stuff? How did you come upon all of this information?
Reading various thought leaders in the space. There are some amazing people who have written books on using LinkedIn as an outbound channel. And then in addition to that, just running copious amounts of tests ourselves. Predictable revenue is in this unique situation where we're running for a ton of different clients in a bunch of different industries and numerous different personas. We have the benefit of being able to test and iterate a lot faster than most SDRs do. So we've been able to test hundreds of different campaigns against one another in various different profile settings and optimizations against one another to see what performs the best. And kind of touching back to that thought leader thing, if we have noticed if somebody sort of reaches that quasi celebrity status on LinkedIn, if you really are about being on stage with an area that you have expertise in, actually not just sharing, but creating content around that, framing yourself as somebody who, not only is knowledgeable, but pushes boundaries in a particular space, that's going to end up having your campaigns perform significantly better. We've ran LinkedIn campaigns through people who are CEOs that are, on the Forbes 30 under 30 list, who have massive engagement, and people who are constantly sharing interesting, relevant content, who just have, again, massive engagement because they're sharing this great content that their target market resonates with. So, beyond reaching out to these people for an initial conversation, if you're starting to connect with them and get this base of followers who are engaging with your content, it makes it worth creating it that much more.
Right. Makes sense. And I think that kind of feeds into a question we have here from a listener. So Hemant is asking, LinkedIn recently changed some algorithms, and I imagine that's happening all the time, Brandon. Like they're constantly updating things. So he's asking if you can kind of elaborate on the changes and how, as a result of those changes, you've kind of figured out how to still get more reach and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure exactly how or what they're changing in their algorithms. I just know that relevance with your target market not being too broad spectrum is what seems to be benefiting most of our clients and our profiles when we're working on getting the strongest results that we possibly can from LinkedIn. Yeah, like you say, Sarah, they're changing them all the time.
Yeah. Okay, well, hopefully that answers your question, Hemant. I think it is a bit of a hit or miss type of game. There's no way to kind of preempt these changes in LinkedIn's algorithm. But as Brandon said, it's about kind of running multiple tests at any given time so that you can see what works and what doesn't. And as he mentioned, to get more reach, it's about that relevance factor. So really making sure that the content that you're putting out is for a specific audience and that it's very relevant and very useful and it's providing value for those that particular audience so that you then get high engagement and that in turn extends your reach.
Absolutely. Outside of this profile optimization stuff, and we could get really deep into that, and I don't want it to sort of monopolize the time that we have here today. Bernard and I would love to get into some of the more tactical stuff, actually building some Sales Navigator searches, some of the key, the key things that we've found while building those, and creating messaging that might resonate with different types of people, and then how we go about following up with them once we get different types of responses. I'm just going to stop sharing this for a quick second. We'll bounce back to that later.
Yeah, I just want to echo what you said. If you do the LinkedIn outreach, it doesn't help that you go and try and umbrella everything over one thing. You know, it's like that's not going to work as well. If you specific with your targeting and you stick to what your market wants, obviously you're going to generate a lot more success going forward. So maybe that's one way to beat the algorithms, is to be more specific, like was mentioned before. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I definitely find when people specialize or stick to a certain theme that it's really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. While you're loading that up, Brandon, we've got a couple of other listener questions and comments here, so we'll just rattle those off. So we've got from Steve, thoughts on Sales Navigator. Is it a no-brainer? Should we all have it if we're prospecting?
Yes.
I'm a huge fan of the tool. Honestly, Sales Navigator is the most comprehensive and up-to-date resource of relevant contacts that exists. There's a ton of other data suppliers out there where you can purchase contact lists, and there's pros and cons to everything. You know, what you might find on a DiscoverOrg or Zoom Info will overlap with what's on LinkedIn. So a hybrid approach that consists of all of it is what I typically recommend. But LinkedIn is super relevant because you're getting it directly from the contacts. They're updating their profile as they get a new job. You have access to their existing title, and often if people are, and this is getting better as time goes on, people are engaging more and more with LinkedIn, but often people are writing out their role and their function. It's easy to try and search for people who are actually working on the types of issues or the types of jobs that your solution may assist with. So targeting becomes, pretty easy on LinkedIn. That being said, there are some cons. You don't have instant access to their business email. These are things that you have to request from them, or their direct phone line. These aren't things that you get access to with 100% of the people on LinkedIn. Some people have their phone number, and again, you don't get access to their personal or email or phone number until they've connected with you. So, again, pros and cons, but really relevant data. I think Bernard and I would love to cruise through an example Sales Navigator search, talk about some of the idiosyncrasies of making queries within LinkedIn Sales Navigator, because certain things are really accurate, certain things aren't so much, and we'll talk about how to sort of circumnavigate some of those issues and get your list as relevant as you can. So for a bit of context here, this is for a client that assists people with accelerating the deployment of their machine learning models. And I won't get too deep into their solution because despite having worked with them for a while, even some of it's over my head. But the people that we want to target on this list is what I want to focus on. And some of the parameters that we've entered within this search that help us include and exclude the type of people that that we do want to be reaching out to. So I'll expand it to this view here. To show some examples. So the key pieces that I always include in every list, obviously you're going to want to include your geography. If you've got a more specific territory, if you're just focused on people in California, obviously you can narrow that down a little bit further. Bernard and I, when we're building lists, we think there's sort of two ways to start to target the accounts that you want to reach out to. One of them is LinkedIn's industry parameters. So, this solution that I'm talking about, that I'm building this list for, is a fairly horizontal solution. Plus the titles that we're searching are what's going to help us determine whether or not it's on target. If somebody's got a machine learning title, which I'll explain a little bit more down below, they're probably going to be on target regardless of the industry that they're in, except there are a few industries that we wanted to exclude. So as opposed to, clicking on the industries that we did want to include, we added them and then clicked the do not include button to kind of exclude those people.
you look at the numbers, it changed drastically from 937 almost now to 609. So you are a lot more targeted by just using the exclusion option there.
Absolutely.
So you take that completely away, take that, and yeah, a lot more detailed, a lot more
Absolutely.
focused.
And for this particular list, we ended up getting a lot of people who were professors on the list. They're teaching machine learning at universities. So we wanted to exclude higher education because they're off target. They don't have the budget for this type of solution. They're teaching the machine learning engineers of tomorrow, as opposed to actually working on products or building a solution. And so the couple ways that we would go about building a list would be off industry parameters. That's sort of the first step of targeting what type of companies. If you want to narrow it down by company size, if you're wanting to ensure that you're only reaching out to companies with a headcount of 500 plus, that's quite easy to do with the company headcount down here. But further than that, with the company filters, the best results that we've achieved when building a sales navigator search is by going account-based. So if you've got a target account list, it's really easy to enter that within LinkedIn Sales Navigator. And you can actually enter this as a Boolean string. You don't need to type the company name out and click each independent one. I can go Amazon or Apple or IBM. And then you've got everybody at those organizations. So if you've got a concise target account list, that's going to be the way that you're going to ensure that you're filtering out even more people who are off target. And as opposed to typing that out, there is it's pretty easy to just create a string of that text in Excel and string all of those company names together with an or in between, just to streamline your process a little bit. So going back down to relevance here and exclusion criteria, I would say the things that you exclude are almost as important as the things that you include. I'm going to expand this here. So here's a few. The ones in blue are the ones that we're including. Again, this is a machine learning product. Natural language processing or natural language understanding is referring to people working on voice recognition machine learning. And so there's a lot of people who have just the acronym NLP for natural language processing. But here's a really great example of where exclusion criteria is helpful, because NLP also pulls up people who are neuro-linguistic programmers, which is off target for us. We don't want to target them. So, NLP trainer would be referring to the neuro-linguistic programmer. So if there's different combinations of the acronym with other key indicators that they're off target, you can add those to the list and exclude them. Again, specifically neuro-linguistic programming, excluded that. I don't want anybody in sales or marketing. I don't want anybody in psychotherapy, which is what neuro-linguistic programming is. No sales. I don't want any students. I don't want any trainers. I don't want any interns, which is up here as well. So, that's gonna narrow your list down and get people who are much more on target.
I would spend a lot more time. I would spend a lot of time on the exclusion stuff, because in the long run, it's going to pay off. So I'm not going to waste that time on the back end, replying or having sent out a message, having to explain why I sent to the wrong person. So it just, the more time you invest here in building the correct list, the better it's for you in the long run, in the next month that you're going to be working with this and stuff like that. So definitely play with this all the time. Look at the results. You can save the lists even. So you can create a list or a search. You can save the search. There's options to save it. Then you can go back maybe the next day, because it takes a lot of time. You sit in there, it's like, oh man, I have to type in all this stuff and then I'm not going to use it. And then I have to redo it. Save the list, go back the next day, look at the list again, do the exclusions. But like I said, spend some time on this to help you in the long run, for sure.
We've got a question here, guys, from the audience, specifically about Sales Navigator. What integrations would you recommend with Sales Navigator?
There are some really interesting ones out there. There are automation tools, but I don't want to get too much into that. That is outside of LinkedIn's terms of service. So, use those at your own risk. But those do exist. In terms of lead capture, there are ones along the lines of Lead IQ, which allow you to look at a Sales Navigator list and actually pull that out as a CSV. I think they have a paid version that where they try to access the contact information, so the direct phone number and the business email as well. So yeah, Lead IQ is a good one, and I know there's various others. Do you know of any off the top of your head, Bernard or Sarah?
I don't think so. Lead IQ would have been the one that I would have. Yeah.
And then for verification, it's Sales Fresh Address. I think there's one other source too. But yeah, like Brandon said, use it to your own discretion because yes.
Yeah. But yeah, Lead IQ is a good one, and there's various other products like that you can utilize to sort of pull a CSV, right? Scrape or scrap.
Yeah.
Right. Scrap. Yeah, I know that there's a few more. I'm just thinking about the one that we're using. And let's see here. What's your opinion on LinkedIn Helper? And again, that one's an automation tool. So, that one will send out automated LinkedIn invitations and endorsements and stuff like that. But again, that is outside of LinkedIn's terms of service. So be cognizant of that your account could get flagged, and you could lose access to your account by using those sorts of things. Now, certain sales engagement platforms like Outreach will allow you to keep track of your LinkedIn activity, and you can manually trigger a LinkedIn invitation to go out through a platform like Outreach, and then keep track of the responses and metrics by manually inserting the results of that. That's a good way to sort of keep track of your actual activity on LinkedIn and not lose what you're doing, because the quantity of responses that you can get once you start reaching out to people on here can be pretty daunting. The engagement is quite high.
Definitely Outreach, because you can set notifications to re-engage with somebody. If you maybe have lost track with somebody, there's sequences that you can set up for yourself also, that you can track engagement, follow-up, manual tasks that you can do in Outreach because of the integration between LinkedIn and Outreach, which is very helpful.
Exactly. Couple more pieces that I wanted to mention about LinkedIn Sales Navigator before Bernard and I jump into some messaging examples. But yeah, before I jump into that, I'll set the tone with anything that we share is in terms of messaging is an example, right? It's not the be all end all. There's so many ways to approach this, but I do want to share some examples of what we found have worked for us in the past.
It might be the be all end all.
One quirk with LinkedIn with their Sales Navigator is that the seniority level, and this goes for other parameters as well, industry too, the seniority level can be highly inaccurate. So we've selected, for instance, entry level, we ran a test where we selected entry level and senior and manager, or even just entry level, and typed CEO as a title, and people were still showing up. Like CEOs of like SMBs and like global Fortune 1000 companies were listed as entry level people. So for the purpose of not missing out on people who may be on target, sometimes I expand the seniority level a little bit beyond what I typically would. Often if I'm trying to reach a decision maker, I want to be reaching out to director level and above in most instances. Sometimes managers at larger orgs or for certain solutions will have decision-making power too. But some people who are on the exec team might be listed as entry because they haven't been classified correctly on LinkedIn. So these are things to keep in mind. And That's why I'll expand the seniority, but include more exclusion criteria to try and filter out those people who are maybe a little too junior. And then years of experience is helpful as well. Who's directly out of university and just finished their internship and got offered a role if you're not selecting less than a year. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
People might be with the titles, with seniority level, there's a lot of discrepancy sometimes with that because people like to maybe inflate it a little bit on inflate themselves maybe a little bit on LinkedIn. So just be aware of that. So the more work you put in after you create your list, go vet your list, go through your list, go do the research, look at this person, or these people might be the correct people to reach out to. So CPO might be chief product officer, or it might be chief party officer. So you don't know unless you go and check it before you do your outreach. Also, even though you book your list very well.
We had another question in the chat that was, is it possible for me to see who viewed my LinkedIn posts? I would imagine that there's probably a tool out there for that, but I'm not familiar with one. In terms of LinkedIn messages for people who you're reaching out to, it's possible to see who's seen those for sure. But I'm not too sure on the posts.
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions here. We had one about what's the best time to post on LinkedIn and how many times a day you should post. Another one, the one that you just mentioned there. So seeing who viewed your posts, and then one from the last one here, LinkedIn posts or LinkedIn messages. I think when we're talking about LinkedIn posts and posting and that kind of stuff, that falls more under the umbrella of kind of marketing. And what we're talking about here is the outbound, the prospecting, the outreach. So what we're focusing on here is the messaging and the kind of reaching out to the cold prospects, how to find this right prospect, how to target them, that kind of thing. But absolutely the posts factor into it, because as Brandon and Bernard shared at the beginning, the kind of more of a following you have, the more likely you are to kind of build a really strong brand and a company awareness and trust, and that'll help with your outreach. But what our kind of expertise is in as predictable revenue is on the actual outreach side of things. So certainly maybe one of our marketing team could share in the YouTube comments as well what they kind of think about each of those questions. But for the purpose of today's live stream, we're going to focus more on the messaging side of things, the prospecting side.
For sure.
Sarah, just for one, I really enjoyed that other question, because on the front line, if you're an SDR, you reach out all the time. Just that one question, when is the best time to reach out? It's like, it's right now. It's like, because people have their phone in their hands and they texting and they sending messages. So there's a little green dot on there. The best time to reach out and communicate and interact is the minute you get it. Doesn't matter. So my manager would tell me not to tell you this, but if you sit at night and you get a ping on your phone after hours and you want to just reach out, send a message. That's me maybe, but the best time when they respond back. Immediate interaction for me is that's the best practice for me personally. But other than that, use your discretion, work in business hours maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. For messaging as immediate as possible. In terms of posting, you're going to have to try some stuff out and see what happens.
Yeah, exactly.
For posting, one of the biggest things that I've seen recommended is consistency of schedule. So if you're going to post once a day, maybe do it at the same time, mid-morning, mid-afternoon, or if you're going to post once a week, try and do it on the same day. It's just the consistency of that schedule, and people will begin to start to expect that. There was one other thing that I wanted to mention. Oh yeah, the time to reach out to people. We've actually ran tests running messaging on the weekend, and again, we're not recommending anybody work outside business hours. Don't get sucked into that black hole. But engagement is actually higher with direct messages on the weekend. LinkedIn's a really interesting tool. It blends social and business, and people often do use it for entertainment or to look at that interesting content. One other piece I want to see here or show here before I field another question and we jump into some messaging examples here. So the keyword Boolean tool, or the keyword tool, and where you can enter Boolean strings, this isn't something I haven't touched on yet, but it's incredibly valuable and incredibly strong. If you're searching for people who have a certain area of expertise, you want to see people who are skilled in Python. Now there you go. All of these machine learning engineers are skilled in Python. It's mentioned somewhere in their profile, whether in a current job description or one of their skills down below. They know it. If I want to make sure that I for sure am filtering out anybody who has a similar title but is still off target, and I want to make sure I'm only reaching out to people who have something to do with machine learning. Since it's 2 words, put quotation marks around that. But there you go. That dropped the list from 900 to 600. I can be pretty sure that these 600 people are going to be on target to reach out to for some sort of machine learning oriented solution. So I'll stop sharing that now because we can jump back into some messaging in a moment. And yeah, we got a question. It's, do you think it's okay to directly pitch when you connect with someone, or what is the best way to go about it? Perfect timing, because we're going to jump into some messaging examples that show ways that we've gone about it. And it is possible to be solution oriented in your messaging without being overly salesy. The biggest recommendation I would make to people is to not be immediately salesy on LinkedIn. Again, as a social platform, there's a social debt you have to pay for before you ask somebody to just, view a demo. And there's a fine balance that you have to try and walk. You're going to have to do some testing and iterating with your messaging to find that balance, because you don't want people to feel a bait and switch when you get them on a call and then you discuss, something more sort of knowledge share oriented or a softer approach, and then immediately switch to a demo. So you've got to be salesy enough, but not so salesy that you alienate yourselves from them and coax that no. And we'll show you some examples right now.
So to answer that question, it's like, no, don't pitch in try really hard not to pitch in your opening message or your connect message. Like the social debt that you have to pay, like Brandon said. And a lot of sometimes these messages require you to, before you send the message, it requires you to provide an email. So you've done that backward, source the email, and then you can send this message. And now you're going to waste it on pitching a sale and maybe scatter the people away. So no, just flow into it, make a conversation. And yeah, like Brandon, we'll get into that now a little bit.
So the biggest thing I always try to keep in mind is that sales is a funnel, right? And in that funnel exists stepping stones. And the barrier to entry for the first stepping stone, if you can make that incredibly low and easy for them to say yes to, then it starts them on the path of saying yes. And you're constantly, increasing that barrier to say yes to all the way towards making a sale. The first barrier that you need to overcome, the first stepping stone, is just getting them to say yes to accepting your invitation on LinkedIn. So don't send an invitation message that sells right away. I've received a ton of those where it's like, hi, Brandon, I saw your profile. We help people do this and this and this. And it's like, that's their first outreach to me. Like I don't know, maybe it's just me, but that just immediately kind of turns me off from wanting to connect with them. If they say, hey, I noticed your profile, or noticed this thing, or I'm in the same space as you, I'd love to chat about relevant piece of information. It's like, okay, sure, I'll click accept connect on that guy. He hasn't scared me away yet. Here's an example of the first 2 messages of one sequence. Then we actually have 2 more of these, which we'll go over. But the pieces that I want to touch on here are how important it is to be relevant. 1 second here. There we go. So first examples of messaging in the sequence, first messaging sequence example that we want to share. And this is just the first two messages. We might follow up with more content after this, but I just wanted to give you guys an idea of how we would try and open up a conversation with some people. The key point that I want to touch on is how we try to establish relevance and make it easy for them to say yes. So for instance, in this invitation message, it's we're reaching out to directors of innovation professionals. So if we're working in the same space as them and they're in construction and materials as an industry, we've done a great job of building relevance here. And are you open to connecting to discuss high-level trends shaping the future of materials innovation? They're innovation professionals in the materials industry. That's their world, right? You're not saying right off the bat, are you open to getting on a call with me to learn how I can help you do better at your job in materials innovation? And I'm going a little further than I might for that example, but
there's no solution offer, there's no pitch, there's nothing. It's just, hey, you know what? Let's some people might feel like, no, I don't want to chat with you, but most people are like, okay, cool. I like the wording that you use. I like the level of communication. So let's give it a shot. Let's talk about this. I'm not offering you anything. I'm offering a discussion because it's a social platform. So be social on the social platform.
Absolutely. And so this message right here, again, it's the key points are relevance. You're relevant, and it's very soft. It's a super soft ask. Are you open to connecting because we're in the same space? A lot of people are going to say yes to that. This follow-up here is actually an example of a follow-up that is quite solution-oriented. And I do have some softer examples of follow-up as well that might have a better conversion rate in terms of getting people onto a meeting. But if your goal is to filter out people who aren't dealing with a particular concern or aren't interested in particular areas of, in this example, innovation, then this message would do a pretty good job of that. And so it's the next step in the stepping stone. Once they've accepted that invitation request, you're following up with them, thanking them for connecting, immediate call to action. Do you have any time to share some thoughts? And again, that's a pretty soft ask. It's not, do you have any time to, connect for a demo to learn how we help our customers? And then you're touching on a couple points, or in this example, we're touching on a couple points of how we help, or not how we help, but areas relevant to the target prospects space. So these might seem, and this is through research, and you guys, when you're writing your campaigns, your industry professionals, what are some of the key things that an innovation professional in the material space is thinking of, or whatever persona in whatever industry your target prospects are thinking of, and some of the jobs that they're trying to achieve in that space. You can weave that into your messaging here, and you see what I've got bolded in the second and third sentence in this message. Again, it's building more relevance. And then at the bottom here is take advantage of the emerging technologies disrupting the materials, construction, and manufacturing space. One of their primary goals as an innovation professional in that space is to take advantage of the emerging technologies. So again, a lot of testing and iterating will help you find the sweet spot of what's going to resonate with people. But honestly, this simple campaign has generated a fair amount of positive responses and quite a few meetings for this client.
Brendan, what's your recommendation for the timing on this? So when do you send that follow-up?
For sure. So this is one thing I've noticed a lot recently, is that a good portion of the people who accept your invite, who are going to respond, will respond within a half an hour to an hour. So once you see that connection, the earlier you can get this follow-up, the better. You don't want to do it within a minute because you look super, super eager, and that's a bit much. But if you can do it within 15 to 30 minutes, if you're cruising through your inbox and you notice that, you have the opportunity to get this second message out, which offers a little bit more context, which might filter out people who aren't a fit. depending how you format that second message, you have an opportunity to, like I say, filter out people who you don't want to be speaking with, because if you don't get this second message out quickly and you just keep this first message going out to them, and don't respond in time before they give you a positive response, you might get a ton of false positives. If you're on target enough with relevance with this first message, you're going to get a lot of people who will say, yeah, I'm open to a conversation, just from an invitation message. We noticed that. Sorry, jump in there, Bernard.
No, I was going to say, it's like the relevance to that, because people is obviously going to go look at your profile. So that's where your profile building comes in. It's like, is your profile relevant and all that stuff. So if they're going to accept it, you can automatically assume that they've already looked at your profile. They know who you are, and they know what kind of conversation you might want to have with that person. I guarantee there's probably a lot of people that just go click, yes, accept. But you're going to weed those out if people accept and maybe send a message, or just accept. I always assume that they've looked at my profile. I always do that. So that's going to help you to understand that they do look at your profile. What kind of message am I going to go and create right now?
Mm-hmm. And taking a look at this as a template, if it's a high value contact, like the global head of innovation at a large organization, I might click into their profile and see, like, what are the technologies that they're focused on or trying to validate or work on, and replace some of these pieces that are bolded, right? Templates are great and they can work at scale, but the higher the value of the prospect, either size of organization or seniority of contact, personalization goes a long way there. So make sure you continue to do that and don't just stick to a straight cookie cutter for every single message.
Yeah. I'm curious to understand the biggest issue your peers are facing currently, those sympathize or empathy with them, maybe because of the current situation that we're facing, the new normal that we're in right now. Mm-hmm. Maybe we need to be more empathetic going forward too. So that's why you have those snippets that you can use in your messaging. So words that I like you seen work is curious to understand biggest issues with peers, because then you put them on a level where with what they can relate to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the next message is sort of in that frame a little bit. I would call this approach that's up on the screen sort of a knowledge share oriented approach. Like, you're like, hey, I want to share information and back and forth about things relevant to our industry because we're both in the same space. That's the general tone of this. Whereas you can go a little bit further. And then this one, this call to action is looking for input. And I see this tactic used a lot on LinkedIn, but it still works. So, it's a really interesting way. If you get your job statement correctly, for instance, here, I'm reaching out to analytics leaders, asking them about Power BI integrations. I know that Power BI integrations themselves can be a headache. So right there, I might be resonating with a pain point before even actually alluding to the fact that there may be challenges with Power BI integrations. And so that's the potential subtlety that you can inject within your messaging. It's like, hey, how are you thinking about business problem A? Upon accepting that connection request, it's, again, sort of a more looking for input oriented language. But then it goes a step further. So I'm trying to understand the challenges that might face around job statement, automating the data flow between Power BI and your custom software. So elaborating on Power BI integrations. Have you ever faced any challenges building data pipelines into Power BI? This is an example of a challenge that we've identified as a trend within analytics leaders. Like, a lot of them have faced challenges with this. And if they're facing a challenge right now, it's like, yeah, I am, or I have, and are you open to a call? And then this can lead to a call that's often quite strong, because if you've got somebody at the right time with the right job statement, then it's going to make your discovery call quite a bit easier.
You can almost divide it into three. So obviously it's a thanks, and then it's the open-ended question, the second one maybe, and then the third one is have you ever faced challenges because you sort of alluding to that you might have a solution to the problem in that last one. So
Yeah.
it's open-ended, sort of alluding, and just to clarify that structure maybe a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And then again, that it's all about those stepping stones, right? First step is getting them to say yes to your connection request, and the second step, or potentially a little bit further if you don't get a strong positive from one of the first couple messages, is to get a yes to an offline conversation. And we'll actually show you how you can quite easily convert that, convert a positive response to an actual call shortly. We've got one more example of messaging to share with you here. And, Sarah, this is kind of along the lines of a methodology that I know you've employed in the past here. And I think, you're probably the queen of this, but reaching out to people based off of their post engagement that is relevant to you as an SDR, your business's solution. So this is an example of a message that's worked quite well back for that Sales Navigator search that we showed you. We found people that were responding to articles on machine learning model deployment and how to accelerate that. And this solution helps people accelerate their ML model deployment. So it's like, hey, I saw your response to the person who posted the article on ML model deployment and wanted to reach out. I wanted to connect to share thoughts on new methods to accelerate model training and validation. And that's getting a ton of positive responses. I think the connection rate of this campaign is like 45+%. So almost half the people that we're reaching out to are connecting with us on this one. And then out of those who connect with us, about half of them are responding. So for every 100 invitations we're sending out on LinkedIn, we get like 25 people actually engaging with us with some level of response, whether positive or negative. And a good chunk of those 25 actually convert to meetings. And then this follow-up message here is super concise. I'd love to share how our platform optimizes the labeling process to reduce model iteration times. If you have a compelling enough solution that fills like a major gap, you can be as, this one's not very soft. It's like, I'd love to discuss how we do this, how we help this, but yet they're still getting a lot of positive responses because they have massive differentiation in their space. If you're in a really crowded market, maybe not as effective to go in this hard, but for these people, it works. So I wanted to show this as an example of like the opposite ends of the spectrum. And there are so many other different strategies that you can employ that probably will work for you. But here's just, here's an example or a starting point of a few that have worked for us.
Yeah, I want to just jump in there. Sorry, Bernard, to cut you off. It's just about the for this specific type of messaging, if this appeals to you the most, like you think you've got that really differentiated offering and you think this is going to be the kind of best way to approach your target market, there is a way that you can actually filter your Sales Navigator list for people who have engaged on LinkedIn in the past 30 days. Because of course you might try to do this strategy and you'll go through all these people's LinkedIn profiles and you'll be like looking for something that they've done. And a lot of people aren't very active in terms of kind of posting or commenting on LinkedIn. So you can actually go into your Sales Navigator list. And once you've, Brandon kind of showed how you pick out who you want to be in that list. Once you kind of search for that list and you've got that list of people, there's just a tab that's right at the top that says filter by people who have engaged in LinkedIn in the past 30 days. And once you click on that, there you go. It doesn't mean, of course, necessarily that it's going to all be really relevant engagement, but it certainly means that it'll make this type of strategy a whole lot easier for you.
Yeah, exactly.
And Bernard, you were going to say something.
Yeah, just quickly, it's like if you look at this previous example, there was sort of the three definite structure, like hello, introduction, data. And this one completely broke the mold on the follow-up. There's no consistency really, but both of these performed different because of the target. So there is so much, I don't know, there's so much experimenting to be done still with messaging and all this stuff happening on LinkedIn. there's really no be all end all. Just to refer back to the bit, really is nothing, and it's constant experimenting.
Yeah.
What works, what don't work, what works.
I definitely second that.
Mhm.
Yeah, because I mean, you know, it really does depend on your solution and the target personas and the target industries that you're reaching out to. What's going to resonate with, a machine learning engineer is dramatically different than what's going to resonate with an HR manager for hotels. You know, just like trying to give out a couple examples there, but your messaging style is probably going to be different for those people. And again, your solution plays a role in how you approach it as well. And so I guess before I go into the next part, which is how simple it can be to convert the meeting, typically my messaging sequences on LinkedIn will be longer than 2 messages, but I just wanted to show these first couple. I would say 80% of the people who convert to a meeting will actually convert after one of the first 2 messages. Or potentially a little bit more back and forth, but you might get a positive response out of most people early in your messaging sequence. Beyond this, I might send a message that includes some content. It's like, hey, here's how we've helped ML engineers achieve this, and then share an article. And then beyond that, it's like, hey, just nudging this up. Just curious, is machine learning your focus, or do you have a colleague you'd recommend I reach out to instead, as a breakup message, just one last ditch effort? It's like, hey, is this you, or do you have somebody else I should be reaching out to? That's sort of how I format some of the next messages in a sequence. Pretty kind of concise and straightforward. I know Bernard can speak to, once you get a positive response, the sort of the spectrum of positive responses or types of responses that you might receive to one of those invitations or one of those follow-up messages, and how you might deal with those responses and try and drive them towards them actually getting on your calendar. I'll let you jump in there, Bernard.
Yeah, this is a weak positive, the strong positive, and you have to gauge it accordingly. So you don't want to force yourself on the prospect either. So you could say, if you have a strong positive, this sounds great, let's talk. The best thing that we need to do now we need to try and source the email for us potentially to book the meeting. So I don't know, for me, I don't have a solid example here, but do you mind providing a business email so we can solidify time for our calendars? It's almost a call to action, and you put the ball in that person's court, so they sort of have to respond to you in an appropriate time. That seems to be working really, really well. And we try to focus on business email here too. There's some routes you can follow. Most of the people on the profiles have their personal emails, but for our purpose, we like to try and keep it to business emails, obviously. An interesting one that happened is the person or the prospect provided me a personal email, and I really needed the business email. So what I did is I went ahead, it's like, I did send you an invitation. I did send you an invitation to your email. It seems to have bounced. And then within a couple of minutes after that, he replied, oh, I'm so sorry about this. This is my business email. And I sourced it that way. So there's ways around that to get to the business email. I don't know, Brandon, what else do I need to speak to on that? Yeah, meeting confirmed. I received the business email. Now I would go ahead, use either one of the calendars that we have available, as either Chili Piper or Calendly or whatever. Book the meeting on there, and then I would try to send him a confirmation on this. So I would say, hi, whoever, I send you a placeholder and I put the date. Please reschedule if you need, right here. Looking forward to discussion. It's not, I don't try to make it too much, because I have the business email, have the opportunity, there is interest, get it done, get to a point where you can get to the meeting. So I would send that message immediately. Don't waste any time between getting the business email almost and sending this. This is time sensitive, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, if I can elaborate on it a little bit, this is one process here where like I like to keep my hands on the steering wheel of the process. So, if I'm talking about a spectrum of positive responses, like on one end is the really strong positive response. Somebody is super interested. They say, yeah, I'm available Thursday at 2. Here's my email. Then you can just straight up send them a meeting invite for Thursday at 2 if you're available. That's the strongest positive response you're going to get. On the other end of the spectrum is in terms of positives, you might get a thumbs up emoji. And it's like, okay, I need to have a little bit of a dialogue with this person before I can go and book them. But if somebody says, yeah, it sounds great, I'm open to a conversation, you don't need to say like, no, are you open to a call? It's like or even if they say like, yeah, sure, I'm open. At that point, they've given you a positive response, and sending them a quick response saying like, sweet, can you send me your email so I can shoot you a placeholder? That's maintaining control. Once they give that to you, we've ran tests between providing, a couple bullet points. It's like, I'm available this time, this time, this time. Here, let me know what works and I'll send you an invite. We've ran tests against just sharing the calendar link, being like, sounds great, find some time in my calendar. And then we've ran tests using this process where we assume that the meeting is going to occur and we request their meeting invite and then just book them in for a placeholder 3-4 business days out. And what we found is people are much more likely to jump in, reschedule to a better time after you've made that assumed close on the meeting actually occurring than they are to go in and book in the first place, or they are to even respond. People have the best intentions and they may genuinely want to get on a call with you, but people are super unreliable. So if you can maintain control and just like drive it forward to make it happen, it'll affect the amount of meetings that you end up having.
Definitely keep driving. So I understand now. Just as an example, there was almost a 3-month period that I was hunting somebody down for a meeting, and the person changed jobs in between. The person, same title, different job, different location, and it took me 3.5 months to eventually book the meeting. And I can't find the thread on that, but it's constantly driving, constantly sort of giving a little bit of control, but maintain most of the control on your side of the conversation. Brandon alluded to would you be interested into this about for a discussion, and you just get a thumbs up. It's like, oh, this is awesome. At least I got some feedback. That's a challenge to me. So I would send something back, or an emoji, or I would send a GIF. I don't know how to say that stuff. Anyway,
the GIF battle of
GIF, whatever, a meme. I don't know, but I would send something to drive the conversation. I always ask a question. I'm still waiting for the one meeting that I can go through the whole conversation just with emojis and finally just say meeting. I'm waiting for that moment to happen. Still hasn't. But yeah, strong positive. Yeah, people is not always reliable. So keep tabs on it. Keep driving the conversation. Give them the option to share or to reschedule. They have the power to do that. That gives them some control, but you have most of the control because you put it out there initially.
Absolutely. Yeah, one more point on if it is a weak positive, if it's a strong positive, I'll just straight up ask for their email to send them a placeholder. But if it's weak positive, you can reiterate what you actually want to discuss. So, do you mind providing that business email? What I want to discuss is this, key benefit point related to your jobs that you're trying to accomplish, sort of as an example there. So again, if it's a weak positive, I'll probably elaborate a little bit and try and find something from their profile to inject some relevant piece in their profile to inject into my follow-up message to work towards converting it. Just a few key points. And all of these templates are, sort of standardized, the ones that we've shown you here, but, keep in mind, obviously, try to use your actual language, how you might actually type, throw some humanity into it and be personable, right? Have a little bit of fun with it. I had one template that worked well that was like, hey, I dropped out of my PhD program to create a less soul crushing way to achieve this. And it's like that resonated with a lot of people because it's super straightforward or super human, right? And people found it funny. So if you can add some humor into it, like actually be a human being, you're reaching out on like almost like a messenger program, right? You know, you're chatting with somebody. So keep it as such. And that goes back to try not to be overly salesy if you can.
And especially with the new normal that we're facing too, just acknowledge that in some way, you know, trying to adapt to the new normal, trying to be human. Everybody went through this whole pandemic thing. People probably don't want to hear about it all the time, but you can gauge a conversation and see where it might be necessary to acknowledge something like this. Oh, you're super busy. I can't imagine the effects that the pandemic might have had on the industry. Just acknowledge those, be human. That's one of the main things. Be human in your messages.
Yeah, especially for the people who say, you know, I'm really busy for the next 2 weeks. You know, empathize with them, right? You know, I had an example where I think a prospect responded back that they thought that their child had COVID, and it's like, okay, yeah, it's no, there's the time for empathy. Ultimately, the child didn't. They just had a cold. So in case anybody was worried, but you know, it's just like things like that where it's like, okay, here's time to turn off the machine and like just be a human a little bit. I think that somebody from the chat had shared an example of messaging with us as an opportunity for us to sort of do a bit of a live review. So I think we have one more slide that touches on some metrics benchmarks that we've kind of seen team wide. And I'll go over those. Oh, never mind. That's not on here. I do want to share that. Oh yeah, here. So after running hundreds of different campaigns for our clients, we've noticed some connection rate averages, response rate averages, and then sort of conversion rate averages that we've noticed are sort of standard across the board. You know, at a bare minimum, I want my connection rate being 15% when I'm, you know, for 15 out of every 100 people I'm reaching out to connect with me. Sometimes the number can be a little bit lower if you're reaching out to everybody's in the C-suite, right? As opposed to manager level and above. Those things will affect it. Optimally, I'd like to have it above 20%, and anything above 25%, I feel like is quite a successful campaign. The reply rate, you know, again, sort of in that 20% range for every 100 people who actually connect with you. I'd like around 15, 20% plus of those people to be actually responding to some capacity, whether positive or negative. And then the ultimate conversion rate from messages sent to meetings booked, I want it to be above 1% if possible. So I've noticed that this is pretty consistent across the board, unless you have a really complex solution in a very saturated space or with a long sales cycle. Some of these things can affect that and pull you outside of these averages. But honestly, for every 100 LinkedIn invitations you set up, you'll probably get at least one person on your calendar. And I would assume even more, especially if you're injecting some personalization. We have some clients that get somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 7% conversion rate. So for every 100 messages that are sent out, we end up putting like 5 meetings on their calendar. So possible to achieve some pretty strong results with this.
Just before we jump into the use example here, I just want to mention to all of you guys that we are doing another virtual summit. It's coming up. It's Own Your Growth Sales Strategy Edition. So it's going to talk about a lot of the stuff that we're talking about here. And some other kind of further in-depth different strategies. We've got amazing guest speakers such as Danny Herzberg from Slack, Justin Michael from Your Appy, Dale Dupree from the Sales Rebellion, and a whole bunch of other really great people. We're going to share a link if you do want to check it out, if you do want to register. And if you do have any kind of questions or comments about growing on LinkedIn, you can leave them below, and our team will be sure to get back to you if you're not the one who's got the example that's going to be worked on here. Yeah, so I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned Own Your Growth, and I'll reiterate at the end here, but let's get into that example.
And this is the first time that I'm reading this, so I'm going to cruise through this really quickly.
Is this a connect message or the first message after the connection?
It looks like it wouldn't fit under
No.
the
Mhm.
300 character limit
Yeah.
for an invitation message. So I'm curious if this is, I guess the two scenarios that I'm assuming here would either be a blank connection request or this is an in-mail template that's going out.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to read through this again one more time here.
Yeah, maybe you can comment there and provide us some color, and then we can figure that out.
Cool. Yeah, it's my first goal maybe with outbound email message, not a LinkedIn message. Okay. Yeah, I mean, honestly, for email, this is probably similar, somewhat of the language that that I might use. Tells a bit of a story. Let's see here. I would maybe try and tie sort of the customer journey into a little bit more. The priorities, I would say, are spending more time analyzing data and improving performance. Automating data collection and transformation from all of your advertising, sales, and marketing platforms. Those are maybe the pieces that that I would focus on. But as far as an email template goes, this type of language is more suited for email. It's
I would drive it
yeah.
toward having that open-ended question and not having assumptions right off the bat. Like with the explosion of data and marketing platforms, it's harder and harder. We don't know that they might facing this. We need to explore what issues are you facing and not making assumptions. So acknowledging the fact that you really don't know this person and they don't know you, you need to go and find out what pain points they have. You can't make the assumption that they do have that pain point. So that's one thing. That's how I would just reword in such a way that, I don't know, you might say I've noticed that might not be right, but making assumptions right off the bat might not be um, a good approach. I don't know what the metrics is on the reply rate on this email. Maybe it's really, really good. Maybe it's not, because that's where the testing comes in again. We need to know a lot more info on the use of the email.
Yeah, why don't we take this example and say, if this was a really successful email template, but now we want to try LinkedIn as our prospecting channel, how do we kind of change this into the type of, let's change it to that connection request message for that initial connection on LinkedIn? What do we have to do to this email to make it ready for that?
Yeah, so I can see like a really, and I'm sort of brainstorming and spitballing here as I go, but I can see a pretty straightforward and concise invitation message that I might write sort of based off of this. I might just say, hey, name, I'm in the marketing space as well. Are you open to connecting to discuss ways you can automate data collection for your advertising and sales? So you can, analyze them to improve their performance. Something simple like that. It's like, are you open to discussing ways to do this and this to achieve result?
Yeah.
Yeah. So just kind of, slicing out some of the key points, pulling it under that 300 character threshold. I find that LinkedIn's character limit for that invitation message has really supported concise copywriting skills for me, because I've written so many LinkedIn messages that it's starting to leak over into my emails as well, where it's like, okay, I've got to get relevance, like a pain point, and how we sort of tie into that in a very sort of diplomatic manner in a very small amount of words. And so, if you can get in the habit of creating strong, compelling LinkedIn invitation messages, I think your copywriting as a whole is going to benefit from it.
Yeah.
Curious if if anybody else that's on the live stream right now or on the chat, if you have an example LinkedIn invitation message that you'd like us to workshop live, more than happy to add it to the slides here and cruise through it and see if we can come up with any ideas.
Yeah, please drop that in, guys, if you have it. And I'll take this chance to answer another quick question here. So from Shirag, is there any tool that can automate sending follow-up messages? Yeah, we did mention a little bit earlier that there are quite a number of tools that can help you with this type of thing. But again, they don't really, LinkedIn doesn't really want you to do that. They sit kind of outside of the parameters of LinkedIn's kind of regulations. So while you can find a lot of these types of tools that would automate everything from, you know, the initial message all the way to the end of your follow-up messages, it is possible that your account will be flagged by LinkedIn. And what could happen then is that you're basically locked out of your account and you can no longer use that account. So for instance, if you've built up your connection requests, you've built up your connections. So say you've got like 20,000 plus connections as like a thought leader in your space. You post a lot of content and your LinkedIn presence is valuable to you. You got to be really careful risking that with these automation tools, because if you get locked out, you're going to have to start totally over again.
If it's a differentiation between LinkedIn and email, for LinkedIn, yes. For email, yes, there's a bunch of tools. I don't know if the question is referring to LinkedIn to email, because the previous one was about email. And so
Absolutely.
Outreach and all that other stuff is available definitely for
email. There's tons of sales enablement tools that are totally great,
above board. With LinkedIn and those automation tools, the biggest thing that's gonna raise a red flag for LinkedIn is the volume. So you know, again, I'm not recommending this, but if you are going to go that route, that's something to be cognizant of. Don't crank it up to the max amount of invites that you can send out on a daily basis. If your activity goes from sending out 0 invites per day to 100, then that's that'll raise a red flag.
Just reading that too.
Yeah, Caesar mentioned he would leave the CTA and lead with a relevant value prop, since accepting the connection request would imply that they're open to a conversation.
So this is in your kind of first follow-up message after an accepted connection request.
Yeah,
I think you want to tailor that value prop to make sure that you're not explaining your product right off the bat, and rather focus on continuing uncovering those pains and those challenges. And then if you can position with your value prop yourself as a solution to specific challenges, definitely that's the way to go. But I would say, I wouldn't say lead with a value prop until you are 100% sure that they have that problem. Kind of keep the discussion going before you present that value prop.
It's almost like the value prop is your profile, because we was going to look at your profile. So the call to action, that's a good point, but the call to action in that message, where it is in the message, I don't think it's very relevant, because it's a call to action. You can do it at the beginning, and it's a short message. It's not going to be a long-winded message or email that you send. You're not restricted in characters in your second message. You still want to keep it like an SMS, back and forth kind of thing going. You don't want to saturate the whole message with too much information.
Mm-hmm. And I, you know, the stepping stones, like, are you open to connecting to chat about this in an invitation message? They might think that you just want to have a dialogue on LinkedIn itself. So adding another CTA that's like, you know, that makes it clear that you want to take it to an offline call, that I find helps sort of set the tone and doesn't catch people off guard. And, you know, again, those baby steps towards getting them on your calendar. And I always try and keep in mind that I'm not trying to sell my product at all. I'm not trying to sell my product on LinkedIn. I'm trying to sell them on meeting time in my calendar, because if you can get them on a meeting in your calendar, that's when you have the opportunity to do a proper discovery call, ask them questions, you know, uncover their pain points, illuminate their pain points and how your solution weaves into those and can make their life easier. You don't need to do any selling in your invitation messages. You can start to set the tone with achieving jobs that they're trying to accomplish, or how your solution achieves those jobs. But I often don't try and throw a ton of value and benefit points of the solution right into the initial messaging, because all I want is 30 minutes with them, because you can get into that there.
Awesome. Well, we'll leave a couple minutes here if anyone else does want to get in some messaging that they'd like us to review live here. If you don't want to share it live, or if you haven't thought of what to share, you're welcome to share it with either of these guys on LinkedIn. They're open to those connections. Send them a connection request, 100% guaranteed connection. It'll be your best performing campaign yet. So feel free to do that. And of course, they'll be happy to work on that with you. I'm going to mention again that we have the Own Your Growth Virtual Summit coming up, where we are going to chat about topics like these. We're going to get really in depth about sales strategy. So that's going to be email, LinkedIn, cold calling. We have some really, really wonderful guests that we're going to be bringing on that are thought leaders in this space. And we will shoot that link there in the YouTube comments so that you can feel free to register. But I will say it, if you can't see it, it is predictablerevenue.com/growth. So you can register there. And yeah, we'll leave a couple more seconds here. Oh, and of course, if you are watching on YouTube, please click the subscribe button so you can get more videos like this in the future, and you can be kept up to date on everything that we're sharing here.
So I don't know, it's like if somebody have some like a connection message that they want to share, some metrics that they might have on their site that they want to share, that'd be interesting too. Ideas, also we're always open to ideas and feedback, not just us vomiting a bunch of information at you. Just like share, open platform. Yes.
Exactly. Okay, we'll leave it for one more minute here, and then we'll assume that everybody's too shy and that they're going to message you guys offline, which is totally okay. Yeah, so I guess I'll begin my outro as we leave a little bit of time. Thank you so much for watching this edition of PredRev Live. We're going to keep coming to you live every Thursday at the same time. So click that subscribe button, watch this space, and we'll be always sharing really actionable sales tactics on each of these lives. We bring on different experts from the Predictable Revenue team, from the execution side, from the customer prospecting side, from our own outbound side, and everywhere in between. So we've got a lot of great perspectives that we'll bring on here. And I'm sure for those of you listening, we'll always have somebody that is kind of in your seat coming on PredRev Live here. Yeah, I think that must be it. Doesn't look like we've got anything coming in the chat here. Any last words from you guys?
Thank you so much. It's been a real treat to join you in what I assume are your home offices for most of you. So yeah, it's been wonderful. Hope you got some value, and for sure, feel free to reach out to Bernard or myself on LinkedIn, add us, and I'm always down to chat, have a quick question that you need answered, just throw it out there and I might be able to answer it for you.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. Click subscribe, register for Own Your Growth, predictablerevenue.com/growth. See you guys all next week.